For 3 years, I saved every penny for our dream house down payment. While my girlfriend Cassey worked at her passion project café, $85,000 in our joint savings account. Money from my construction overtime, weekend landscaping jobs, and countless sacrifices. Then Cassey started acting strange, making secretive phone calls and claiming the cafe was struggling. When I suggested we finally start house hunting, she kept making excuses. Just a few more months, she'd say. The business needs me. Then one morning, I woke up to find our entire savings account emptied. Every last dollar gone. A single bank transfer to something called Kitchen LLC. I tracked down the address, expecting to find Cassey's failing cafe. Instead, I discovered a bustling upscale restaurant owned by her ex-boyfriend Dylan. My $85,000 had funded their romantic reunion and his dream business. But here's the thing about playing with other people's money. Sometimes the house always wins. And I was about to buy the house. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Nelson Cole, and for 3 years I lived with the woman I thought I'd marry. Cassey Finch had this infectious laugh, and a way of making even the smallest moments feel magical. When she told me about her dream of opening a cafe, I didn't hesitate to support her completely. I want to create something beautiful, she'd say, her eyes lighting up as she described rustic wooden tables, hanging plants, and the smell of fresh pastries filling the air. A place where people can escape from the world for just a moment. I worked construction during the day, pulling double shifts whenever possible. Weekends found me doing landscaping jobs for extra cash. Every spare dollar went into our joint savings account, miles our future together. While other guys my age spent money on cars or nights out, I lived in work boots and paint-stained jeans, dreaming of the house we'd buy together. Cassey worked at a small cafe called Maple Corner in the Arts District, claiming she was learning the business from the ground up. The pay was terrible, barely covering her car payment, but she insisted the experience was invaluable. I'm not just making coffee, she'd explain. I'm studying every aspect of how to run a successful cafe. Our tiny apartment reflected our financial priorities. Second-hand furniture, a television that only worked if you hit it just right, and a refrigerator that hummed so loudly we couldn't hear movies. But we were happy. Every evening Cassey would curl up next to me on our thrift store couch, sketching cafe layouts in a worn notebook. Look at this, she'd say, showing me drawings of espresso machines and seating arrangements. Once we save enough for the cafe, we can start looking at houses. Maybe something with a big kitchen where I can test recipes. The house hunting could wait, she insisted. Her cafe came first. I understood. Dreams require sacrifice, and I was willing to make them for us. I opened a separate savings account specifically for our house down payment. Construction work in Millbrook Valley paid well, especially with overtime, and I was determined to give Cassey everything she wanted. The cafe first, then our dream home. Month after month I deposited every extra dollar, $500 here, $1,200 there. Sometimes $2,000 after a particularly good week. Cassey would kiss my cheek when I showed her the growing balance, telling me how lucky she felt to have someone who believed in her dreams. You're my rock, Nelson, she'd whisper. I promise I'll pay you back for all of this someday. By our 3rd year together, we'd accumulated $85,000, enough for a solid down payment on a nice house in the suburbs, with money left over for moving expenses. I was proud of what we'd built together. Not just the savings, but the partnership. We were a team. Cassey's work schedule became increasingly erratic during those final months. Late nights at Maple Corner turned into overnight shifts. Weekend training sessions kept her away for entire days. When I offered to visit her at work, she'd brush me off. The owner is really strict about personal visits, she'd explain. Besides, you work so hard all week. Use your free time to relax. She started taking mysterious phone calls, stepping onto the balcony or into the bathroom to talk privately. When I asked about them, she'd claim they were work-related. Suppliers, she'd say, with a wave of her hand. Super boring stuff. Some evenings, she'd come home smelling like expensive cologne instead of coffee and pastries. Her clothes seemed nicer too. Designer jeans and silk blouses that definitely didn't come from her minimal paycheck at Maple Corner. End of season sale at the mall, she'd explain when I complimented a new outfit. You know how good I am at finding bargains. I trusted her completely. Love makes you blind to red flags, doesn't it? Every strange behavior had a reasonable explanation, and Cassey delivered them with such conviction that questioning her felt like questioning our entire relationship. The conversations about the cafe became more frequent and detailed. She'd researched specific locations, calculated startup costs down to the penny, and even chosen a name, Autumn Leaves Cafe. She painted such a vivid picture of our future that I could practically smell the cinnamon rolls baking. "I found the perfect spot," she announced one evening, bouncing with excitement. "It's in the Oakwood district, right near the college campus. College students love coffee, and there's foot traffic all day long." She showed me photos on her phone, a charming storefront with large windows and exposed brick walls. "The rent is reasonable, and the previous tenant left some equipment behind. I think this could really be it, Nelson." That night, lying in bed with Cassey's head on my chest, I felt genuinely content. We had savings plans, and most importantly, we had each other. 3 years of sacrifice were about to pay off in the form of her dream business and our dream home. I had no idea that while I was planning our future together, Cassey was funding someone else's. The morning that changed everything started like any other. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., kissed Cassey goodbye as she pretended to sleep, and headed to the construction site. We were working on a new office complex downtown, and the project was running behind schedule. Double time pay meant I wouldn't be home until after dark. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from our bank. "Low balance alert. Your savings account has fallen below $500. I stared at the message, confused. There had to be a mistake. Our account had $85,000 just yesterday. I called the bank during lunch break, my hands shaking as I waited on hold. The customer service representative's voice was calm and professional as she confirmed my worst fears. "Yes, Mr. Cole. There was a large withdrawal yesterday evening at 6:47 p.m. The entire balance of $85,247 was transferred electronically to an account registered to Crimson Kitchen LLC. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. Crimson Kitchen LLC. I'd never heard of any business with that name. And the timing at 6:47 p.m. was when Cassey had been taking one of her mysterious phone calls on the balcony. Was this transfer authorized by both account holders? I asked, already knowing the answer. "The account requires only one signature for electronic transfers, sir." The transaction was processed using the correct login credentials and security codes. I hung up and immediately tried calling Cassey. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Still voicemail. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my lungs. The rest of the workday passed in a blur. I went through the motions of operating heavy machinery, while my mind raced through possibilities. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Cassey had made some kind of investment we'd discussed, and I'd forgotten. Maybe there was a logical explanation, but deep down I knew. The secretive phone calls, the new clothes, the late nights, the reluctance to let me visit her workplace. It all pointed to a truth I wasn't ready to face. I drove home that evening preparing for a confrontation, but our apartment was empty. Cassey's car wasn't in the parking lot, and she'd left no note. I searched through her belongings, looking for anything that might explain the $85,000 transfer. In her dresser drawer, beneath a stack of sweaters, I found a business card, Crimson Kitchen Contemporary American Cuisine. The address was in West Side Grove, about 20 minutes from our apartment. On the back, someone had written opening night, "You did it, babe. D." My hands trembled as I held the card. Contemporary American Cuisine was a far cry from the cozy coffee shop Cassey had described. And who was D? I drove to the address immediately, my heart pounding with each mile. West Side Grove was an upscale neighborhood filled with trendy restaurants and boutique shops. Young professionals walked the sidewalks carrying expensive shopping bags and talking on the latest smartphones. The building that housed Crimson Kitchen was nothing like the modest cafe space Cassey had shown me in photos. This was a sleek modern restaurant with floor-to-ceiling windows and valet parking. Through the glass, I could see elegant dining tables set with white linens and gleaming silverware. A sign by the entrance read, "Grand Opening, tonight only by invitation." Well-dressed people were walking inside, holding embossed invitations and chatting excitedly. I parked across the street and watched, hoping to catch a glimpse of Cassey. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe she'd invested our money in some kind of restaurant venture without telling me, planning to surprise me with the profits. Then I saw them. Cassey emerged from the kitchen, wearing a stunning black dress I'd never seen before, her hair professionally styled, and her makeup flawless. She was laughing, radiant with joy, as she walked arm in arm with a tall man in an expensive suit. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The man was handsome in that effortless way some people possess: confident smile, perfect posture, the kind of presence that commanded attention. He pulled Cassey close and kissed her forehead, as she beamed up at him with pure adoration. I recognized that look. She used to look at me that way. They moved through the restaurant, like a couple celebrating their greatest achievement. The man gestured proudly at the elegant interior, while Cassey nodded and smiled, occasionally standing on her tiptoes to whisper something in his ear. Other guests approached them throughout the evening, offering congratulations and praise. They were clearly the owners, the power couple behind this successful new establishment, and they were celebrating with my money. I sat in my truck for 3 hours, watching the woman I loved celebrate her new life with another man. The life she'd built with our savings. The future I'd sacrificed 3 years to make possible. As the evening wound down and guests began leaving, I finally saw the man clearly as he stepped outside to thank departing customers. He was everything I wasn't: polished, sophisticated, the kind of man who belonged in a place like this. When Cassey joined him outside, he wrapped his arms around her waist and spun her around, both of them laughing with pure happiness. She kissed him deeply, completely lost in the moment. That kiss told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a business arrangement or a secret investment. This was love, real, passionate love, and it wasn't with me. I drove home in numb silence, my mind struggling to process the complete destruction of everything I'd believed about my life. 3 years of work, 3 years of sacrifice, 3 years of planning a future that had never existed. Cassey didn't come home that night. The next morning, I called in sick to work and began my investigation. I needed to understand the full scope of what had happened, even if the truth destroyed me completely. I started with a simple internet search: Crimson Kitchen, Westside Grove. The restaurant's website was professionally designed, featuring gorgeous photos of the interior I'd seen the night before. The About Us page told the story of 2 passionate entrepreneurs bringing their culinary vision to life. Chef Dylan Mercer, formerly of Le Bernardin in New York, partners with restaurant manager Cassey Finch to create an unforgettable dining experience in the heart of Westside Grove. Dylan Mercer, so that was D, and Cassey was listed as his business partner, not just an employee or investor. They'd built this together. I dug deeper into Dylan's background. His social media profiles painted the picture of a rising star in the culinary world. James Beard Award nominations, features in food magazines, celebrity chef appearances. His Instagram was filled with photos of elaborate dishes and behind-the-scenes shots from high-end kitchens. But it was his older posts that made my stomach drop. Photos from 2 years ago showed Dylan with his arm around a familiar figure. Cassey, looking younger but just as radiant, at various restaurants and food festivals. The captions told a story I'd never heard. My inspiration and my heart couldn't do this without you. See, 2 years of planning, but we're finally ready to take the leap together. My partner briefing is here's to our future restaurant. The timestamps revealed the truth. These posts were from before Cassey and I'd even met. Dylan wasn't some new romance. He was her past, present, and apparently, her future. I scrolled back further, finding photos of them together at culinary school, working side by side in restaurant kitchens, traveling to food festivals across the country. They'd been together for years before Cassey ever entered my life. A business registration search revealed that Crimson Kitchen LLC had been incorporated 18 months ago, with Dylan Mercer and Cassey Finch listed as equal partners. The initial capital investment was listed as $90,000 18 months ago, right around the time Cassey and I had started seriously saving for our house down payment. I found more evidence on Cassey's social media accounts. The ones she'd told me were just for staying in touch with old friends. Hidden among photos of coffee cups and sunset selfies were subtle clues I'd been too trusting to notice. Photos of expensive meals at restaurants we definitely couldn't afford, tagged with Dylan's Instagram handle. Her location services showed frequent check-ins at upscale establishments in Westside Grove, the same neighborhood where Crimson Kitchen was located. Comments from friends congratulating her on finally following your dreams, and so excited for the restaurant opening. The puzzle pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. While I'd been working overtime and living on ramen noodles, Cassey had been living a double life. Her shifts at Maple Corner were actually planning sessions with Dylan. Her supplier meetings were romantic dinners. Her new clothes weren't clearance rack fine. Nice. They were gifts from a man who could afford to spoil her. I drove to Maple Corner, the cafe where Cassey supposedly worked. The manager, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, confirmed my suspicions. Cassey Finch, she worked here for about 6 months, 2 years ago. Sweet girl, but she quit when she got that job at the fancy place downtown. Haven't seen her since. 2 years ago. Before we'd even started saving money together. I spent the rest of the day gathering evidence. Bank records showing the pattern of my deposits, and screenshots of Dylan's social media posts. Photos of Cassey at Crimson Kitchen's grand opening. Business registry documents proving her partnership in the restaurant. By evening, I had constructed a timeline that broke my heart. Cassey had met me during a temporary breakup with Dylan. Maybe they'd had a fight. Maybe he'd needed time to establish himself professionally before committing to their restaurant dream. Either way, I'd been a placeholder, a convenient source of funding while she waited for her real life to begin. Every conversation about our future cafe had been a lie. Every kiss after I'd made another deposit was manipulation. Every I love you had been spoken while she was secretly planning a life with another man. That evening, Cassey finally came home. She walked through the door at nearly midnight, still wearing the black dress from the restaurant opening, her makeup smudged and her hair disheveled. She found me sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by printed evidence of her deception. Bank statements, social media screenshots, business registration documents, the entire paper trail of her betrayal. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Her face cycled through emotions, the surprise, fear, guilt, and finally, something that looked almost like relief. Nelson, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. $85,000, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. 3 years of my life. 3 years of believing we were building something together. She sat down across from me, her hands shaking as she reached for the bank statement, showing the transfer to Crimson Kitchen LLC. I can explain, she said. But we both knew there was no explanation that could justify what she'd done. Dylan Mercer, I continued, sliding a printed photo across the table. Your business partner, your real partner. Cassey's composure crumbled. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, unable to meet my eyes. How long? I asked. How long have you been planning this? Since before we met, she whispered. Dylan and we've been together for 5 years. We broke up for a while when he went to New York for his apprenticeship, and that's when I met you. But when he came back, she didn't need to finish. I understood. I'd been the intermission between acts of her real-life story. I never meant for it to go this far, she continued. At first, I just needed a place to stay, while Dylan established himself. But then you were so good to me, so generous, and the restaurant needed funding, so you decided to steal from me. It's not stealing, she protested. It's an investment. The restaurant is already successful. I can pay you back with interest. I laughed bitterly. Pay me back? With what? You're half of a restaurant you bought with my money. The truth was finally out, but instead of feeling relieved, I felt empty. 3 years of my life had been a lie, and the woman I'd loved had never existed at all. Cassey packed her belongings that night, while I sat on our thrift store couch, staring at the evidence of her deception. She tried to apologize several more times, but the words felt hollow. As she reached the door with her final suitcase, she turned back one last time. I did care about you, Nelson. That part wasn't fake. After she left, I sat alone in our tiny apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had never been real. But as the shock began to wear off, something else took its place. Determination. If Cassey thought she could steal my money and walk away to her perfect new life, she was about to learn how expensive that mistake would be. That night was the longest of my life. I sat in the darkness of our empty apartment, surrounded by the evidence of Cassey's betrayal, feeling like my entire existence had been stripped away. Layer by layer, the silence was deafening. No more sounds of Cassey humming in the shower. No more clinking of her coffee cup against the kitchen counter. No more soft breathing beside me in bed. I tried to sleep, but couldn't stop my mind from racing. Every memory felt contaminated now. Her excited sketches of cafe layouts had been real. Just not for the cafe I thought we were planning together. Her talks about our future had been genuine. She'd simply been referring to her future with Dylan, funded by my labor. By dawn, I was pacing the apartment like a caged animal. I called in sick to work again, knowing I was in no condition to operate heavy machinery. My hands shook every time I thought about the $85,000, money that represented not just savings, but sacrifice. 3 years of skipping meals, working weekends, living in this cramped apartment, with broken appliances, and second-hand furniture. I needed to see Crimson Kitchen again, to understand exactly what my money had built. This time I went during the lunch rush, parking across the street, and watching the steady stream of customers entering and leave. The restaurant was clearly thriving. Through the windows, I could see Cassey moving between tables, her professional smile never wavering, as she chatted with customers. She wore an elegant burgundy dress, and moved with confidence through the space that my sacrifice had created. She looked radiant, successful, completely at home in this world I'd unknowingly funded. Dylan emerged from the kitchen periodically, checking on diners, and accepting compliments, with gracious charm. When he and Cassey were in the same room, their chemistry was undeniable. They moved around each other with practiced intimacy, communicating with subtle glances and touches. This wasn't a new romance, this was a partnership, built over years. I watched them kiss briefly behind the hostess stand, and something inside me snapped. The rage that had been building since discovering the truth erupted like a volcano. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, my vision blurring with fury. They were living their dream life with my money, celebrating their success, while I sat alone in a truck that was falling apart. I drove to the construction site, but instead of reporting to work, I sat in the parking lot and made phone calls. First to a private investigator I found online, then to a lawyer who specialized in fraud cases. Both appointments were scheduled for later that week, but I needed action now. That afternoon, I returned to our apartment and began systematically searching through everything Cassey had left behind. In the back of her closet, I found a shoebox filled with items I'd never seen before. Business cards from upscale restaurants, receipts from expensive stores, photographs of her and Dylan at various culinary events. At the bottom of the box was a leather journal. My hands trembled as I opened it to find Cassey's handwriting, chronicling the past 3 years of deception. January 15th, Dylan called today. He's ready to move forward with the restaurant plan. Says he has the culinary credentials now, but we need capital. Maybe $80-90K to do it right. Nelson is so sweet, working all those extra shifts. He really believes we're saving for a house together. March 3rd, deposited another $2,800 from Nelson today. He looked so proud showing me the account balance. I hate lying to him, but Dylan and I have been planning this for so long. Just a little longer, and we'll have enough. June 18th, found the perfect location in Westside Grove. Dylan loves it. The rent is higher than we initially planned, but Nelson's overtime pay is covering everything. He has no idea how much money I'm actually putting away for the restaurant. October 22nd, Nelson mentioned looking at houses again today. I had to deflect with the cafe story. He believes it so completely. Sometimes I wonder if I should just tell him the truth about Dylan and me. But we're so close to having enough funding now. December 14th, Dylan proposed. Not marriage, but the business partnership we've always dreamed of. Crimson Kitchen is really happening. I'll have to break things off with Nelson soon, but I want to make sure the restaurant is successful first. He deserves some happiness, even if it's not with me. Entry after entry detailed her calculating betrayal, her complete disregard for my feelings, her cold manipulation of my love and trust. She documented my sacrifice like a business transaction, noting my deposits and overtime pay as line items in her restaurant funding plan. The final entry was dated just 1 week ago,
Everything is perfect. Crimson Kitchen opens tomorrow night, and Dylan and I can finally be together openly. Nelson still has no idea about the money transfer. I transferred it all yesterday, while he was at work. By the time he discovers it, the restaurant will be successful, and I can offer to pay him back. Maybe he'll even be happy for me once he understands that his sacrifice helped create something beautiful. I threw the journal across the room, pages scattering like autumn leaves. Happy for her. She thought I would be happy that she'd stolen my life savings to fund her romantic reunion with another man. The betrayal was complete and calculated. Every moment of our relationship had been a performance. Every expression of love a manipulation tactic. I hadn't just lost my money. I'd lost 3 years of my life to someone who had never existed. I found myself standing in our tiny kitchen, staring at the cabinet where we kept our emergency cash. $200 in small bills, money I'd saved for real emergencies. I grabbed it all and drove to the liquor store, buying a bottle of whiskey that cost more than I usually spent on groceries in a week. Back in the apartment, I sat on our thrift store couch and tried to drink away the images flooding my mind. Cassey laughing with Dylan at their grand opening, her radiant smile as she celebrated their success, the ease with which she transferred $85,000 of my money to fund their dreams. The alcohol didn't help. If anything, it amplified the rage coursing through my veins. I thought about driving to Crimson Kitchen and confronting them publicly. I imagined walking into their perfect restaurant and telling every customer exactly how it had been funded. I fantasized about smashing their elegant dining room to pieces. But as the night wore on, the rage began transforming into something colder and more focused. Cassey had played a long game, carefully manipulating me over 3 years to fund her real life. She'd been strategic, patient. If she could play that game, so could I. I woke up the next morning on the couch, fully clothed and hungover, with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. The apartment felt different now. Not like a home I'd lost, but like a prison I'd been released from. Cassey's betrayal had hurt me, but it had also freed me from a relationship that had never been real. More importantly, it had taught me something about myself. For 3 years, I'd been content to work and save and sacrifice for someone else's dreams. I'd never pursued my own ambitions, because I thought I was building something with her. Now I understood that I'd been building something, just not what I'd thought. I'd been building the foundation for my revenge. I called the private investigator and moved our meeting up to that afternoon. Then I called a different lawyer, one who specialized in real estate acquisition and business law, rather than fraud cases. If Cassey wanted to play games with money and property, I was going to learn the rules. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. I needed to know everything about Crimson Kitchen's finances, their lease agreements, their business structure. I needed to find their weaknesses, and I needed to start thinking like the kind of man who could win this game. For 3 years, I'd been Nelson Cole the construction worker, content to sacrifice for love. Now I was going to become Nelson Cole the strategist, and Cassey was about to learn that stealing from the wrong person has consequences she never imagined. The old Nelson would have walked away, maybe sued for the money and hoped for the best. The new Nelson had bigger plans. The private investigator I hired was a sharp woman named Janet Ross, who specialized in financial fraud and business intelligence. When I met her at her downtown office, she listened to my story without judgment, taking detailed notes as I explained the situation. 3 years of systematic deception, she said, reviewing the evidence I'd brought. The journal entries alone prove intent to defraud. But you want more than just legal recourse, don't you? I nodded. I want to understand their entire operation. Financial backing, lease agreements, business partnerships, everything. If I'm going to take action, I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. Janet's investigation took 2 weeks, but the results were worth the wait. She uncovered details about Crimson Kitchen that even surprised me with their complexity. The restaurant's total startup cost had been $340,000. My $85,000 had been crucial seed money, but Dylan had secured additional funding through a combination of investor loans and a small business administration loan that required significant collateral. The most interesting detail was their lease agreement with Meridian Properties, the company that owned their building. Here's where it gets interesting, Janet explained during our follow-up meeting. Their lease is structured as a triple net agreement with a personal guarantee clause. Dylan and Cassey are both personally liable for the full term.
She slid another document across her desk. But here's the kicker. Meridian Properties has been struggling financially. The owner, Robert Meridian, is 73 years old and looking to liquidate his commercial real estate holdings. The entire building is currently for sale. I studied the property listing. 4 commercial units, with Crimson Kitchen occupying the prime corner space. The asking price was $1.2 million, but Janet had learned through her contacts that Meridian was motivated to sell quickly due to health concerns. What happens to existing leases if the building sells? I asked. Depends on the buyer, Janet smiled. New owners can honor existing agreements, or if they find suitable legal grounds, terminate leases with proper notice, especially if there are concerns about the tenant's financial stability or lease compliance. The wheels in my mind started turning. I'd been thinking too small, focusing on recovering my stolen money through lawsuits and legal proceedings. But what if I could do something bigger? What if I could control their entire future? Over the next month, I began executing a plan that would have made Cassey proud of its calculated patience. First, I liquidated every asset I had. My truck, my tools, even my modest retirement account. Combined with a construction loan I qualified for based on my employment history, I assembled enough capital to make a serious offer on the Meridian building. Meanwhile, I started my own investigation into Crimson Kitchen's business practices. I visited the restaurant regularly, always at different times, studying their operations like a competitor conducting market research. I learned their busy hours, their staffing patterns, their customer demographics. I even dined there twice, paying with cash and keeping my head down while I observed Dylan and Cassey working together. They were good at what they did, I had to admit. Dylan's food was exceptional, and Cassey had a natural talent for managing the front of house. They'd created something genuinely successful with my money, which somehow made their betrayal even more infuriating. During one of these reconnaissance visits, I overheard a conversation between Cassey and a server that revealed financial stress despite their apparent success. They were struggling to keep up with their loan payments while maintaining the high quality that had made them popular. The restaurant was profitable, but barely, and they had no financial cushion for unexpected expenses. I also discovered that Dylan had a significant gambling problem. Through Janet's network, I learned he'd accumulated substantial debts at an underground poker game that operated out of a bar in the warehouse district. His creditors were becoming impatient, and he'd been using restaurant funds to make payments. This information became crucial when I submitted my offer to purchase the Meridian building. I offered Robert Meridian $950,000 cash, with a 30-day closing period. Given his health situation and desire for a quick sale, he accepted immediately. The legal paperwork took 3 weeks to finalize. During that time, I continued my double life, showing up to construction sites during the day while secretly preparing to become a commercial property owner at night. I hired a business attorney who specialized in commercial real estate and tenant relations. I wanted everything done properly and legally. I also used this time to establish myself as a legitimate business entity. I incorporated Nelson Cole Properties LLC and opened business banking accounts. On paper, I was transforming from a construction worker into a real estate investor, but the motivation was purely personal. The day I took ownership of the building, I felt a satisfaction I'd never experienced before. Standing in front of the property that now belonged to me, watching customers enter and exit Crimson Kitchen, I knew that Dylan and Cassey had no idea their entire world was about to change. My attorney had already identified several potential lease violations that could provide grounds for termination. The personal guarantee clause meant that if I could prove financial instability or lease non-compliance, I could terminate their agreement and hold them personally liable for the remaining lease payments. But I wasn't ready to move that quickly. Cassey had played a 3-year game of deception and manipulation. I was going to play a longer game of strategic patience. I started by implementing small changes to the building that would increase operating costs for all tenants. New security systems, updated fire safety equipment, enhanced waste management services. All legitimate improvements that any responsible property owner would make, but each one added to the monthly operating expenses that Crimson Kitchen was required to pay under their triple net lease. I also began documenting every aspect of their operation. Late rent payments, violation of lease terms regarding signage and exterior modifications, failure to maintain required insurance levels. I was building a legal case while simultaneously applying financial pressure. The most satisfying part was watching Dylan and Cassie's stress levels increase week by week. Through the restaurant's windows, I could see the tension in their interactions. Heated conversations behind the bar, worried glances when they thought no one was looking. The gradual deterioration of the easy partnership I'd observed during my earlier visits. They had no idea that their new landlord was the man whose life savings had funded their dream. They couldn't understand why their previously accommodating property management had suddenly become so demanding and detail-oriented. 3 months after purchasing the building, I received a call from Cassey. She didn't know she was calling me. Of course, she'd gotten my business number from the property management company I'd hired to handle day-to-day operations. Mr. Cole, her voice was strained, professional but desperate. This is Cassey Finch, from Crimson Kitchen. I was hoping we could discuss our lease terms and perhaps work out a payment plan for some of the recent additional charges. Hearing her voice again sent a jolt through me, but I kept my tone neutral. I'll need to review your account and get back to you, Miss Finch. Please, she continued, we're a successful business, but these unexpected costs are putting significant strain on our cash flow. We've been good tenants, and we'd like to work together to find a solution. After I hung up, I sat in my new office, a space I'd rented specifically for Nelson Cole Properties, and allowed myself a moment of cold satisfaction. The woman who had stolen my future was now begging me for financial mercy, not knowing she was talking to the man she'd betrayed. The irony was perfect, but the game was far from over. It was time for phase 2 of my plan, and Cassey was about to learn that some debts can never be repaid. The call from Cassey marked the beginning of the end. Over the following weeks, I watched through carefully orchestrated financial pressure as Crimson Kitchen began to crumble from within. The additional operating costs I'd implemented weren't unreasonable by industry standards, but for a restaurant already operating on thin margins while servicing Dylan's gambling debts, they were devastating. My property management company, acting on my instructions, began conducting monthly inspections that revealed a pattern of lease violations I'd been documenting. Unauthorized menu boards attached to the exterior brick, improper grease disposal that violated environmental clauses, and most significantly, evidence that Dylan had been subletting kitchen space to a catering operation during off-hours without landlord approval. Each violation came with formal notices and escalating fines. Perfectly legal, completely professional, and absolutely ruthless. I started spending my evenings in a coffee shop across the street, ostensibly working on my laptop, but actually watching the stress consume the people who had consumed my life savings. Dylan's confident swagger disappeared first, replaced by the hunched shoulders and darting eyes of a man drowning in debt. Cassey tried to maintain her professional composure with customers, but I could see the cracks spreading. Their relationship began deteriorating under the pressure. Through the restaurant's large windows, I witnessed heated arguments in the dining room after closing time. Dylan gesturing wildly, while Cassey sat with her head in her hands. The romantic partnership, that had seemed so perfect during their grand opening, was fracturing under the weight of financial reality. The breaking point came 4 months after I'd purchased the building. Janet Ross called me with news that Dylan's gambling creditors were growing impatient. He owed nearly $75,000 to some very unforgiving people, and they'd started making threats that extended beyond money. He's desperate, Janet reported. My source says he's been trying to refinance the restaurant equipment to raise cash, but the numbers don't work. Crimson Kitchen is profitable, but it's not profitable enough to service his debts and meet the new operating expenses. That evening, I made my move. I walked into Crimson Kitchen during the dinner rush, dressed in a business suit that cost more than I used to make in a week. The hostess, a young woman who looked barely out of college, greeted me with a bright smile. Table for one. Actually, I'm here to see the owners. Nelson Cole from the property management company. Her smile faltered slightly. Oh, I'll get Cassey for you right away. I waited in the bar area, observing the restaurant I'd unwittingly funded. The elegant decor, the efficient service, the satisfied customers enjoying Dylan's culinary creations. It really was beautiful. Everything Cassey had described in her sketches all those years ago. My money had built something genuinely impressive.
which made what I was about to do feel even more justified. Cassey appeared from the kitchen, smoothing her apron and forcing a professional smile. The moment she saw me, however, the color drained from her face completely. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, no sound emerging. "Hello, Cassey," I said calmly. "I believe you called about working out a payment plan." She gripped the bar for support, her legs visibly shaking. "Nelson, what are you?" "I own this building," I said simply. "Have for the past 4 months, which means I've been your landlord since shortly after you stole my life savings to open this place." Other customers were starting to notice the commotion. Cassey's face cycled through multiple expressions: shock, fear, confusion, and finally, something that might have been hope. "Nelson, if you own the building, then we can work this out," she said quietly. "We can pay you back. The restaurant is successful, we just need time to—" "Time," I interrupted. "Like the 3 years of time I gave you, while you systematically stole from me. Like the time you spent planning this restaurant with Dylan, while telling me it was our cafe we were saving for." Dylan emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. When he saw Cassey's distressed state and noticed me standing at the bar, his expression hardened. He walked over with the confident stride of a man used to being in control. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, placing a protective hand on Cassey's shoulder. I turned to face him fully, extending my hand in a mock professional gesture. "Nelson Cole, your landlord. And you must be Dylan Mercer, Cassey's business partner, and the primary beneficiary of my $85,000. Dylan's confidence evaporated. His hand fell from Cassey's shoulder as the implications hit him. "You're the landlord, but your name, Nelson Cole Properties LLC. I explained. "I incorporated after Cassey cleaned out our joint savings account to fund your dream restaurant." Seemed like the right move for a man who just learned he had a talent for strategic business planning. The restaurant's ambient noise continued around us, but our corner of the bar had become an island of tense silence. Other customers were beginning to stare, sensing drama even if they couldn't hear our conversation. "Nelson, please," Cassey whispered. "Not here. Can we talk privately?" "Why?" I asked loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Embarrassed to discuss business in front of your customers. I imagine they'd be interested to know how this beautiful restaurant was funded." Dylan stepped forward, his chef's pride overriding his shock. "Look, man, I don't know what kind of arrangement you and Cassey had, but this is a legitimate business. We've got contracts, investors, everything above board." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Above board? Your business partner stole $85,000 from her boyfriend to provide your startup capital. She lied to me for 3 years, telling me we were saving for a house together while she was actually funding your romantic reunion. How exactly is that above board?" The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several customers had stopped eating to listen openly now. Dylan's face flushed red as he realized the implications for his reputation, his business, everything he'd built. "That's not Cassey. Tell him that's not how it happened," Dylan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Cassey couldn't meet either of our eyes. "Nelson, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was going to tell you." "When?" I demanded. "After you'd spent every penny. After you'd moved in with Dylan permanently. After you'd convinced me to sign over the deed to our apartment too." I reached into my suit jacket and pulled out a legal document my attorney had prepared. "This is a formal notice of lease termination, effective in 30 days. You're in violation of multiple lease terms, you're behind on additional charges, and frankly, I don't want to do business with thieves." Dylan snatched the document, scanning it frantically. "You can't do this. We have a 5-year lease with a personal guarantee clause, which means you're both personally liable for the remaining 4 years and 2 months of rent." I finished. "At $18,000 per month, that's approximately $900,000 you'll owe me when you vacate the premises." The mathematical reality hit them like a physical blow. Cassey sank onto a bar stool, her face completely white. Dylan crumpled the notice in his fist, his hands shaking with rage. "This is revenge," Dylan said. "Pure and simple. You're destroying our business out of spite." "I'm exercising my rights as a property owner," I corrected. "The lease violations are documented and legitimate. The financial instability is obvious. Cassey wouldn't have called begging for payment plans if you were fiscally sound." And the personal guarantee you both signed makes you liable for the consequences. I leaned closer, lowering my voice, so only they could hear. But you're right about the revenge part. You stole 3 years of my life, and $85,000 of my money to build this dream together. Now I own that dream, and I'm taking it away from you exactly the way you took my future away from me. Cassey finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. Nelson, I know I hurt you, but destroying the restaurant won't bring your money back. We can pay you, with interest, if you just give us time. With what money? I asked. Dylan owes $75,000 to some very dangerous people. Your profit margins are razor thin even without the gambling debts. And now you'll have 30 days to find $18,000 for next month's rent plus all the outstanding additional charges. The conversation had drawn so much attention that the restaurant's normal energy had shifted. Servers were hovering uncertainly, customers were whispering and pointing, and the kitchen staff had emerged to see what was happening. Dylan made one last desperate play. We'll buy the building from you. Name your price. I smiled, the first genuine expression of pleasure I'd felt since discovering their betrayal. The building isn't for sale, but even if it were, what would you use for a down payment? You've already spent my money. I straightened my tie, and prepared to leave, but I had one final message to deliver. You know what the real irony is, I said, addressing both of them, but speaking loudly enough for the entire dining room to hear. Cassey always told me she wanted to create something beautiful, a place where people could escape from the world for just a moment. She was right about that. This restaurant is beautiful, the food is excellent, the atmosphere is perfect. I gestured around the dining room where every conversation had stopped, but it was built on a foundation of lies and theft. Every elegant table, every piece of artwork, every satisfied customer, all of it paid for with money stolen from someone who loved and trusted you. How's that for your beautiful escape from the world? The silence that followed was deafening. Customers began asking for their checks, the uncomfortable atmosphere driving away the very people Dylan and Cassey needed to stay profitable. As I walked toward the exit, Cassey called out desperately, Nelson, wait. What do you want? There has to be something we can do. I paused at the door and turned back one final time. I want exactly what you took from me, Cassey. I want 3 years of my life back. I want the trust and love I wasted on you returned. I want the future we planned together restored. I let the impossibility of those demands sink in before continuing. Since I can't have any of that, I'll settle for justice. 30 days, then you're both out. And you'll spend the next 4 years paying me rent on a restaurant you no longer own. Just like I spent 3 years funding a dream I was never part of. I walked out of Crimson Kitchen and didn't look back. 2 weeks later, Dylan and Cassey closed the restaurant permanently. They couldn't make the rent payment, couldn't service Dylan's gambling debts, and couldn't survive the reputational damage from our public confrontation. The personal guarantee clause meant they were still liable for the remaining lease payments, which my lawyers pursued aggressively. Dylan left town to avoid his creditors, abandoning Cassey to deal with the financial wreckage alone. She filed for bankruptcy within 6 months, losing everything she'd tried to build with my stolen money. I renovated the corner space, and leased it to a family-owned Italian restaurant at below-market rates. Good people who'd saved their own money, and earned their opportunity honestly. Sometimes I eat there, sitting in the same spot where Cassey used to greet customers with her professional smile. The new owners make excellent food, and their genuine partnership reminds me what authentic love and trust actually look like. I kept the $85,000 Cassey had stolen, not from them, since they had nothing left to take, but from the life I built after learning what I was truly capable of, when someone tried to destroy me. Nelson Cole Properties LLC now owns 7 buildings across the city. I discovered I had a talent for business after all. I just needed the right motivation to develop it. And every month when the lawyers send me updates on Cassey's continued inability to pay the lease judgment, I remember that justice isn't always about getting your money back. Sometimes it's about ensuring that people who steal dreams learn the true cost of their choices. The construction worker who trusted too easily died in that apartment 3 years ago. The man who replaced him understands that some lessons can only be taught through consequences, and some debts can only be paid through loss. Cassey taught me that love can be a lie, but she also taught me that patience and strategy can be more powerful than rage. For that education, I'm almost grateful. Almost. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.